Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Lisa Love, and this is Revelation, an Esoteric Look. And this is a very important video because in this video, we're going to look at the beast. So if you have been watching the previous videos, you know that I always do the same introduction. Feel free to skip ahead, but if you've come in on this video, this introduction is important, and here it is. Revelation is a book in the Christian Bible that is thought by traditional, exoterically minded Christians to predict the end times. And the book is divided up into 22 chapters, and I've discussed the symbology of that in a previous video. Now, throughout thousands of years, people have looked for these end times to come. But could it be that the end times are always here? Might the themes in Revelation repeat themselves over and over again? Well, that is what this video series is making the case about, showing how Revelation is a symbolic teaching that is easily deciphered by those who understand its esoteric meaning of revealing the war between material and spiritual values that each of us must learn to apply to our everyday lives. So the exoteric approach, to let you know, this approach focuses primarily on the outer world of the five senses. We get up and our lives is all about what we see, hear, taste, touch, and smell out there. And the idea of life then is to have dominion or domination of the world out there. Now, this idea feeds the idea of selfishness and separation, primarily because we're looking for our best interest, or at the very most, the interest of our tribal group. And it creates a world of separation, he versus she, one race versus another, one worldview versus another, and essentially it destroys unity. And this view tends to falsely believe in a material reward system, or some also believe in a heaven elsewhere. And this view, whether it's a secular exoteric approach or a religious exoteric approach, glorifies too often the destruction of the earth and the belief that there is one chosen group of people over the others. That can even be in a secular point of view if you're overly materialistic and you're seeking to dominate one group of people so you can get the goodies all for yourself. And as I've shown in other videos, this version eats of the tree of good and evil because it divides everything into a duality where they're fighting against each other instead of creating a unity where they work together, and then as they continue to make greater and greater unifications, slowly evolve. Now, the esoteric approach is much different than that. The focus is not on the outer world, it's on the inner world, beyond what the five senses reveals to us. And the main goal in this approach is not to have dominion or domination out there, but to have dominion or domination isn't really the best word, understanding, insight, compassion into, ability to manage what's in here in terms of yourself and your own negative tendencies. And this version feeds the capacity to create unity, compassion, and love. It's more introspective, and it's more taking the time to cultivate the intuition and to really try and get a larger, more inclusive, more loving, compassionate understanding of what's really going on. And it creates a world of peace, the New Jerusalem talked about in Revelation, where all people's views and races are harmonized together so that our earth is purified, cherished, and respected. Now, I am not saying that all people's views are mushed in together to create what is known as uniformity, one form. We're not talking about all of us having to become the same. We're talking about unanimity. And that is where we can learn to understand and appreciate without judgment, without having to move into political correctness, but rather through the compassion of our hearts and the compassion, yes, of our words at times as well, so that we can build bridges, create more understanding, and create that compassion and love and peaceful world we all want. And that is eating of the tree of life. So, Revelation has 22 chapters, and we have been summarizing those various chapters in the various videos. Here's a quick review. Video 1 covered chapters 1 through 4, and the exoteric view of that. This was a very long video. They're all about an hour, hour and a half long, some of them. So this is a very rapid summary. But video 1 is an exoteric view, is St. John, who wrote the book of Revelation, goes into a mystical state, kind of like on a weird LSD trip, enters the throne room with all kinds of weird creatures and 24 elders all around, and has a vision of somebody sitting in front of 7 lampstands with 7 stars on it, and basically, what the heck is that all about? And eventually he's given a scroll and all this other stuff. Go watch the video. But the esoteric version is that this is a system of yoga. And St. John is training us. I know I moved my picture around. Sometimes that's so I can read and see things on my end. If the video is not moving when I do this, sometimes when I've recorded it, the video moves. Sometimes when I have recorded it, the video hasn't moved. I don't know which way it's going to end up, but just please be patient with that. So the esoteric version is, this is a system of yoga. And if you understand yoga, you understand the symbolism quite easily that St. John is using here. And St. John has gone into what is known in yoga as samadhi. There are many different stages of samadhi, but he's gone into a state of samadhi where he is having a vision. And in that vision that he's having while he's awake, which we can do in a state of samadhi, he is asked by the Alpha and the Omega. He does not label the divine as male or female. It's the Alpha and Omega, who wonders who will open the 7 chakras and light the stars on the 7 chakras, and also train themselves to enter samadhi, or the throne room, along with him. If you just popped into this video series, you're going to be really curious, go watch the video. This video is not about summarizing everything I've said in these many videos I've already created. The next video covers chapters 5, 6, and 7. The exoteric version is St. John is given a scroll with 7 seals on it, and there's this question about who can open the seals. Well, turns out only 144,000 people are able to do that and be sealed. And so the exoteric interpretation is that only 144,000 people, though they find ways to get around that, and we'll talk a little bit about that in this video. But if you take St. John literally, only 144,000 people are really going to get into heaven, unless you also learn to go through a bunch of stuff, and we're going to go into that in exoterically and esoterically in this video and beyond. But the esoteric version of that was quite different. There are 7 chakras, which are the 7 lampstands, and those chakras, if you know the chakra system, have 7 stars associated with them. Those stars, sometimes they're called petals, have 144,000 points that you have to open by becoming conscious and aware of what's involved to get each one of those chakras or petals opened correctly. Those who open them correctly are purified and can enter the throne room 24/7, having reached a state known as Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Now, some systems call that Sahaja Samadhi. There are different systems, and in some that I've read, some Nirvikalpa sounds different than Sahaja. Others, Nirvikalpa sounds the same as Sahaja, but basically it's about having continuity of consciousness and remembering who you are as a divine being 24/7. The next video went through 8, 9, 10, and 11. And the exoteric version, some trumpets were sounded and some horrible things happened with each of those trumpets. And then 2 strange looking olive trees popped up and gave warnings and prophesied that if we didn't change, some bad stuff was going to happen. Even more bad stuff. The esoteric version, again, quite obvious, because all the chakras have, the 7 chakras have 7 trumpets or 7 sounds associated with them. And when the 2 strange looking olive trees pop up, that's basically the separate channels of Ida and Pingala that make up the tree of good and evil versus the tree of life, Sushumna. And those strange looking olive trees give a warning that if we do not do enough purification of our negative tendencies, the Kundalini energy, a dragon, is not going to go up the spiritual central channel, the Sushumna, the tree of life, It's going to go, as I said, into the right and left channels of Ida Pingala, and more destruction and division will occur. I'm going to get my pointer out just because I'm going to need it later. Then I did a separate video just on chapter 12. That was about a red dragon emerging from the sea and sending a celestial virgin and her male child. Male child went to the throne room, the virgin went to the wilderness. Go watch the video. That's essentially about the dragon Kundalini starting to arise and the purified matter of the celestial virgin being chased away into a desert for more purification, while her child, Christ's consciousness, is kept safe up here in the throne room until preparation is made. That's the esoteric version. Now we come to the beast. Chapter 13 includes the beast and a false prophet. We're going to look at the beast in this video and the false prophet in a separate video. Why is that? Because these two characters are so essential in Revelation, and I think it's really, really important, especially at the time I'm doing this video in 2021, when so many people are expecting Revelation to occur or thinks it is already happening around them, to get really clear on the exoteric and esoteric versions of the beast and false prophet. So we're going to have a separate video on each. But essentially videos 4 through 10, this is video 5. In the exoteric version, there's all these battles that are taking place, and those opposed to Jesus arise to prevent the Lamb, who they associate with Jesus. The esoteric version sees that a little differently. But these people are trying to prevent Jesus, the Lamb, from ruling over everybody in the earth. And if you don't follow Jesus and their interpretation of who Jesus is, you're going to be destroyed, and you're going to suffer horrible plagues. The esoteric version is a little different. We're going to get into that a lot more here, which is basically as each chakra, each of the 7 chakras, is stimulated through the activity of sound, the trumpets, a battle takes place in each of the chakras within us. Now that battle can spill out into the outer world, as we will see. Because if we don't complete these battles successfully and purify within ourselves the tendencies these chakras represent once and for all, then the unpurified contents, the bowls, will spill out and cause further destruction and pain. So again, in the different battles that are occurring here, the first battle was that red dragon that I talked about, and the celestial virgin giving birth to a male child. And as she was giving birth to the child, the dragon tried to drown her and the child, but they were saved by a river that flowed out of the dragon's mouth. You can tell why you have to learn to understand symbolism, and why, if you understand the yoga tradition, you'll understand the symbolism better. Go watch that video. The woman's then taken into the wilderness and protected for 1,260 days, 3.5 years. Go watch that video, because it talks a lot about the 3.5 coils of the Kundalini dragon energy that sits in the cave. Sometimes it's a serpent instead of a dragon. Go watch the video. 3.5 is the number for Kundalini. And this is the video on the beast. So we're done with our introduction. Let's go into the story of the beast. After the dragon chases away the celestial virgin, the previous video, now a beast arises out of the sea. The dragon rose out of the earth, but the beast arises out of the sea. We're going to find out that that's important symbolically in the esoteric version. Like the dragon, this beast has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems or crowns. Now this beast was like a leopard with feet of a bear and a lion's mouth. One of its 7 heads had a mortal wound by a sword, but that wound had been healed. And now the whole earth followed this beast with wonder. And the dragon that we saw in the video before, chased away the celestial virgin, gives authority to the beast. It empowers the beast so that men, that's how they talked back then. They weren't gender correct. Everybody was a man, men, meaning all people. The dragon gave authority to the beast, and men worshipped it, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" And this beast was haughty, blasphemous, and it exercised authority for 42 months, making war on the saints until it conquered them. And authority was given over every tribe, people, tongue, and nation, so that everyone on earth worship this beast. Mainly, I should say, everyone on earth worship the beast whose names were not written in the book of life of the Lamb. And next, St. John gives a warning. Up, and it popped away from it. Basically, it says, if you hold others captive, you will be held captive. And if you slay others, you will be slain. I don't know why that one didn't pop up correctly. But now let's look at the exoteric version, and we'll come to that statement again. So the exoteric version of this part of Revelation sees the beast as referring primarily to the book of Daniel. And so I've kind of put a picture that I got off the internet here. This is Daniel, and this is from the book of Daniel, which is in Christianity, they called it the Old Testament. In Judaism, it's the Torah. And Daniel sees a beast that looks like a lion with eagle's wings, a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, a leopard, it looks more like a lion here, with 4 heads. I only see 1 head in this drawing, and 4 wings, and a dragon or strong beast. So this is this artist interpretation of it, not fully accurate to what St. John is saying, but you get the idea. Now, symbolically, in the exoteric version, the first 3 beasts, their attempt at interpreting symbolism, are thought to represent empires that Daniel predicted would emerge to try and crush Judaism. Daniel was before Christianity. And so they assign different, exoteric Christian people assign different beasts to different empires. And that's why I didn't say specifically which beast was what empire, because there wasn't even agreement on what I was finding amongst Christian scholars. But some say they are Babylon, Persia, and Greece, which were thought to be the first 3 empires that different Christian exoteric authors assigned to the different animals that is talked about in the book of Daniel and that they are associating with Revelations, which I don't fully agree with, but we'll get to that. The 4th empire is thought to be Rome, since it also persecuted the Jews as well as crucified Jesus. And most authors believe the Roman Empire is the head that was wounded and recovered, because it was wounded when it tried to persecute the Jews. It recovered and went on to persecute the Christians, and then even crucified Jesus. That's part of the exoteric interpretation. I want to give you the exoteric understanding here so that when you come up against it or encounter it, I shouldn't say come up against it, but some people will push against you, so maybe that is appropriate. But as you encounter it, you will understand it. And you will also understand, since so many people are looking right now in 2021 for an apocalypse, thinking it's happening, etc., you will understand why they think the way they do. Speaking of the apocalypse, here we kind of see a picture symbolizing that. Fast forward, and these same Christians believe St. John is now prophesying about a future empire that will again try to crush Christianity. And those in this future empire, and many fundamentalist Christians now, are saying that that empire is now the United States of America. This is February 2021. There was an attack, a revolt on the Capitol building in the United States in January 6th. As I'm doing this video, the trial for that is going on in the background while I'm talking. I watched part of it yesterday, but I quit to do this video. And part of the reason I quit to do this video is because this view is so relevant to that attack on the Capitol as well. They're not bringing it up in the trial, but it's very relevant. Why? Because I watched live that attack on the Capitol for 5 hours. And it was there for a while and then disappeared, but there was a massive banner that was laid out, and it says, Jesus rules. Jesus saves or Jesus rules, I forget which one. And they were fixated on that banner for a while. It was skipping around different television stations, cable stations, and then finally they all shifted off of it. I knew why that banner was there. It's exactly because of this. It's this exoteric version that attack on the Capitol is seen as part of this Armageddon. Jesus and his warriors behind him to take back Christianity from the evil empire, which they believe has become the United States of America. Why? Because they believe the United States of America is worshiping secularism and other religions or beliefs that run counter to their view of Christianity. And there's many different ideas of what Christianity is about. So it's a particular view of Christianity, theirs, which they believe is the only right view. To prevent this nation from crushing out Christianity, many fundamentalist type Christians now believe that St. John likewise wants Christians to engage in a worldwide war to prevent this. And some are even trying to start World War III for this reason. I watched a number of documentaries where, including one, interestingly enough, I almost hate to say his name in this video, so I won't, by its very prominent person, maybe I'll disclose it later, who did a documentary in 2010, along with some other very prominent people from our government and from a well-known cable network, who were basically encouraging the start of World War III and the bankrupting of our United States government and world so that they could start this war and get the righteous warriors to come and attack, starting with the United States of America and then other places around the world, so that they could rule in the name of Jesus. So they believe the time to start this war is now, and that the worldwide destruction we see taking place, such as the destruction of our trees, our seas and rivers and so on, is happening not because of global warming, but because God is ordaining it. It's a good thing that all this destruction is happening, because it means Jesus is returning, and we need to help Jesus make this happen by being involved in this righteous war. Again, they believe the destruction of our earth is happening because God is against all the people worshiping the beast that we're going to talk about more and more in this video. They define the beast as those who believe in secularism and other religions besides their fundamentalist view of Christianity. There are even those who are Christians that they don't think are Christian according to their view, and therefore they're designating as belonging to the beast. Their fundamentalist view, I can talk, also believes that women need to be subordinate to men. Sex should only be within marriage. Homosexuality is evil. And to add a modern day twist to it, abortion and birth control, things that give a woman a right to her own body, are evil as well. So if you want to look at what's going on in the United States government, the Supreme Court, schools, the battle that we're having, get an understanding of this view. And in a very strange twist that has zero biblical justification, some also throw the belief that all true Christians can only be white, giving rise to something known as white supremacy, which in 2021 is becoming a real problem here in the United States. Now, to let you know, this video is not going to focus on homosexuality, whether women need to be subordinate to men, etc., because this is not, from an esoteric point of view, what any of this is about. So you're not going to hear a focus on that, but it is part of the exoteric view. Let's keep going. Another thing that's going on that helps explain events that are happening here in the world is that exoteric Christians are engaged in a righteous battle against this beast right now. They believe it is their duty to remove their enemies, secularists, homosexuals, believers in other religions, women who refuse to be subordinate to men, and for some Christians, all those who are non-white. Look at what's going on even in the trial as I speak right now doing this video. And you will begin to see why there are those who feel that this is a righteous war. And anybody who is a secularist, a homosexual, believes in other religions, are women who refuse to be subordinate to men, are not white, are the beast. And we need to fight against them. And no matter what comes out of their haughty, blasphemous mouths, it's just discounted, just right over their heads. Doesn't matter, because we know who They're the beast. And once their enemies are destroyed, Jesus will come back and rule over the world, setting up the new world or New World Order, where everyone, New Jerusalem is what I should say, that's what St. John says, where everyone follows a particular version of what Christianity is or else, and they will dictate what the view of Christianity is. Now I'm going to move my video over here so you can see this particular. Do you pledge allegiance to Jesus, the King of Kings? Those that choose by their own free will to turn to Jesus the King to become one of his subjects will experience true liberty. And we need to focus on the language here, especially as we keep going through this video, because Jesus is now the King of Kings who has subjects, and only as we pledge allegiance to him will we have liberty. The ironic thing about the modern day popular exoteric view is how it adds in many ideas that are not found in St. John's revelation and conveniently ignores things that are found there, such as St. John's statement that he says a number of times in Revelation, not just 144,000, but everybody in the end after the Battle of Armageddon, that the only ones that make it into heaven, if you want to take him literally, are those who have never told a lie, are totally pure, and have remained chaste by either never having sex with a woman or never having had sex, period. Why do I say it that way? Because he says basically, you didn't have sex with a woman. What does he mean? I joked in another video. If you're homosexual, you get in? A lot of Christians would be like, no, that can't be it. Well, then what does he mean? Just never have sex. So you get to go to heaven if you've never told a lie, you're totally pure, and you never had sex. Then you get your names written in the book of life and be saved. If you want to be really literal to what St. John is saying, that's what he says in more than one place. So good luck to all of us. The fact that many exoteric Christians and most humans have told lies, had sex, and are not pure does not worry the exoteric Christians. They believe none of that matters because they are forgiven. How are they forgiven? No matter what they've done, they just simply have to say, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. You pledge allegiance to Jesus, or whatever your interpretation of him, and that's all. Then you get to heaven. Pledge allegiance to Jesus, be one of his righteous warriors, get rid of all those people that are part of the beast, and then your name will also be written in the book of life in the end, and you get to go to heaven. I want to bring up another thing that is often associated here, and that is the beast and her connection to Jezebel. Which brings us another exoteric take on this story that has to do with the mortal wound the beast was given by a sword that was healed. Remember, it has 7 heads, and one head was wounded by a sword, and that sword was healed. Now, exoterically, this is how that's explained. This part of the story is thought to refer to a woman named Jezebel. Put an artist rendition of Jezebel here in the video. And if you watch my very first video, the 7 churches were connected to the 7 centers, and I connected the sacral center, Thyracia, with because they tolerated Jezebel as one of its negative traits, to the sacral center as well. We're going to come back to that in this video. Now, who is Jezebel? She's a Phoenician princess who worshipped Baal, the pagan god of fertility. She also married King Ahab of the northern kingdom of Israel. This is unfortunate because there are modern day exoteric Christians who are trying to say, who have said that certain people, I won't name their names, are Jezebel and King Ahab, and are doing that for political purposes to try and get rid of those people. But why is any woman a Jezebel? Let's find out. She is the real power behind the throne. So she persuades Ahab to convert Israelites to her pagan faith. So basically, any woman who has a power behind the man and doesn't do what the man wants her to do, or gets too powerful and haughty, according to their view of her, is a beast. She's the beast. Now, when a 3-year drought occurs, Jezebel and her followers are blamed for it by the followers of Judaism who followed Jehovah or Yahweh. And a vicious fight between the followers of Baal and Yahweh takes place, and deaths occur on both sides. But eventually the followers of Yahweh win, and Jezebel is then viciously murdered, though it is said she went bravely and boldly to her death. Though the Jewish religion was at once wounded, they say, by Jezebel, and by getting them to follow her beliefs, it recovered. This story exoterically is then sometimes or often used to justify how patriarchy needs to keep women and their power in check. Why? Because powerful women are the beast. Powerful women, those who want to be in power or those who are suspected of trying to influence their men in power, are frequently labeled a Jezebel as a means to force them back into submission and subservience to men. Also, women who are free with their bodies and sexuality can be labeled a Jezebel as men seek to control their bodies, sexuality, and procreative abilities. Now, feminist, and there's a lot of debate about who is a feminist. I'm not going to go into that here, but let's just say those who believe in the equality of men and women abhor this view, this patriarchal view of men who don't like women who have power or free with their bodies and sexualities. And for that reason, they applaud Jezebel and turn her into a heroine, much to the dismay of those who want to uphold a patriarchal system. We also see in the story of Jezebel how some of the rest of the symbolism of the battle with this beast is easily pinned on her. Consider what St. John says about those who worship the beast, who are saying, "Who is like the beast and who can fight against it?" Nothing is perhaps more difficult to fight and resist than the human longing to satisfy their desires for sex and pleasure. And as usual, it's a woman who is too free with her sexuality, who tempts a man who then can't manage his own impulses and just has to go have sex with her, and it's her fault. Again, Thyracia tolerated Jezebel, who wanted those she ruled to follow the pagan god Baal and not the Jewish god Yahweh or Jehovah. Many also thought that Jezebel, like this beast, was haughty and blasphemous, made war on the saints of Israel and conquered them. She held authority over every tribe, and some say 42 months, I think it was, is how long that she did that, who knows. The association of Jezebel with this beast also gives meaning to St. John's warning, here it is, that those who take others captive and slay them will be taken captive and slain in return. Fits with Jezebel because she did take some of the followers of Yahweh, some of the priests, captive and slayed them. I don't, priest is a Catholic word, so some of the rabbis or some of the followers of Jehovah took them captive and slayed them, but basically then she was taken captive and slain in return. So in short, they see the beast as anybody that is like Jezebel. As I've already shown in the exoteric version, the connection of what St. John is saying to the ancient tale of Jezebel is used then to amplify the battle of the sexes and defend patriarchy, which seeks to give men control over women's bodies, sexuality, and even their souls. And those who believe differently and make Jezebel a heroine or challenge the male patriarchy fear powerful women, especially women who are in charge of their own lives, pleasure, sexuality. This is not the view we're going to go into in the esoteric version. You're going to find that out in a minute, but I'm just giving you a warning. I'm not then going to turn around and say this view isn't correct and yay, Jezebel, because I'm not even going to go into this battle. Why? Because what is that? Good and evil, creating a battle, fighting against one another. And that's not the yoga tradition. Continuing with the exoteric look. And yet, if we look at what those in the early Christian church that St. John was speaking about in Revelation were being told about the relationship between men and women, We don't see anything about one sex being subservient to the other, quite the opposite. In other words, you can begin to wonder, is this really what St. John meant in Revelation, even from an exoteric point of view? That this is all about the battle of men and women and women needing to be subservient to men? Well, if so, why are these some of the quotes that are found in the Christian Bible that St. John, I'm sure, was well aware of? Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church. So whether it's the church as a female, or the earth as a female, or a woman who's a female, or anybody who represents feminine characteristics, even those inside yourself, maybe it's about love. Here's another beautiful picture. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. Be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. In the same way, you husbands must give honor to your wives. Treat your wife with understanding as you live together. She may be weaker than you are, but she is your equal partner in God's gift of new life. So, even from an exoteric point of view, I wonder if this is what St. John really meant when he talks about this wound. Is he really talking about a Jezebel who had power, who tempted a man, and now those men have to learn how to put her under their thumb, to get her to be submissive, to get her back under control, to control her body, etc., etc. Doesn't seem very resonant, in my opinion, to some of the words that were given by the early apostles to the various churches. Here are some other things that don't seem very compatible with this point of view, especially as Jesus, as a warrior who's going to come out and attack and kill and create destruction and havoc on all those who aren't like him. Here's some more quotes from Christian text. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always perseveres, always hopes. Love never fails. That's the very famous quote by 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8, it says down over here. Now, you don't even have to be somebody that believes in religion. And right there, in your love for others, are you patient, kind? Do you not envy? Are you not boastful? Are you not proud? Do you make sure you don't dishonor others? Are you not self-seeking? Are you not easily angered? Do you keep no record of wrongs? Do you not delight in evil? How could we help but think that the being is anybody who doesn't act like this? If this is what a Christ-like life is about, and this is what we have to do to get into the book of life, even by an exoteric point of view, I don't think it says anything about submission, domination. I don't think it says that. Some more quotes. And now these three remain: Faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. Now, some people argue that word should be charity, not love, but I kept the love word in there. Do everything in love. Now, Corinthians and Galatians, the apostles are talking to members of the early Christian churches, and these are some of the things that they are telling the churches. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Let's look at a few quotes directly from St. John in the Gospel of John, who also wrote the book of Revelation, to get some more exoteric insight into who might be the beast and who might not be. Whoever claims to love God, yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. So love is Christ-like. Hate is beast-like. And he has given us this command: anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. Hint: do not love the world, what you see through the five senses. You get up every day and just be consumed with out there. But rather go in here, go inside. This is a yoga path. This is a yoga message. Go inside and seek the Father within. Seek the God that you have not seen within. And find that. Don't be consumed out there with the beast. Go in here. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Even exoterically, we're being told that if we're afraid, or we have to persecute or punish others out there because they don't agree with our point of view, this is not what St. John, even exoterically, is saying. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. A new command I give you: love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. These are all more than just clues. They're like sirens going off. This is Christ-like life. This is what gets us our names written into the book of life. And anything opposed to this, not seeing others as our brothers and sisters, seeking out revenge and punishment and destruction, this is not Christ-like, according to St. John. It's beast-like. By this will everyone know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. It's not an easy practice, is it? Really learning to love one another. It involves a lot of consciousness, a lot of effort, a lot of discipline, where the word disciple comes from. Some more quotes. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Not hate them and go out and destroy them and attack them and punish and abuse them and beat them into submission and make them lower than you so they are subservient and you rule over them. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. And yes, it is a balance. You can become really codependent and love others to the point where it's unhealthy because they just abuse and take advantage of you. In my For 10 years in my work as a counselor, I specialized in abuse. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness. What does it really mean to be good? And to goodness, knowledge. We have to have knowledge to know how to love our neighbors, to know how to love ourselves, to know how to be good, and to knowledge, self-control. We have to practice what we preach there. And to self-control, perseverance, we have to keep at it. And as we keep at goodness and knowledge, knowing how to do it, and self-control, we're going to get to godliness. And to godliness, I love this part, mutual affection. And to mutual affection, love. We're going up the tree of life here. We're seeking to understand each other. We're seeking to sit down with ourselves and understand what's all the negativity that's coming up. We're seeking to have knowledge of that, to have self-control over that, to persevere in our ability to reach godliness by having knowledge and self-control over that, so we can have mutual affection and love. This is very, very clear, even from an exoteric standpoint, what it means to be Christ-like and what the opposite of this is, which is beast-like. Hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers all wrongs. Whoever pursues righteousness and love finds life, prosperity, and honor. And we're going to see why in this video as we keep going. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, part of the 10 commandments in the Old Testament or Torah, and whatever other command there may be are all summed up in this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. Learn to love yourself with wisdom and respect, and through discipline, and with knowledge and self-control and perseverance, so that you're filled with that love, so that you can sit down and really learn with knowledge and self-control and perseverance how to love your neighbors and others with mutual affection. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. Harmlessness, not violence, not an Armageddon that we go out and create like a mass genocide on everybody that isn't like us. No harm. May the Lord make your love increase and overflow for each other and for everyone else, just as ours does for you. In summary, but instead of honoring all biblical evidence to the contrary of this exoteric view, the exoteric version is promoted, even as I've told you, I'm doing this video in 2021, now believes the celestial virgin of our earth is not being destroyed because of something humans are doing in the way of exploiting, abusing, and raping her through overconsumption and pollution. They believe God is making all this happen. This is a great thing that all this destruction is happening on our planet. And why is that happening? Because the beast. And who is the beast? All you out there who don't agree with me, who don't see things through my eyes, you secularists, you homosexuals, you women, you uppity women, you non-white people, whatever, however I want to interpret it to make you versus me, polarity, demonizing, good versus evil. So why? So I can go to war with you, conquer you, destroy you, get rid of you. God's making this happen because you are evil and I am good. And it's my responsibility to get rid of you, to get you the hell out of here. So instead of Jesus being an ambassador of love and the ultimate pacifist, he himself chose death over advocating a war against the Romans. They had a choice, free Barabbas or free Jesus. And they freed Barabbas. Why? Because they thought Barabbas would go to war against the Romans, and they knew Jesus wouldn't. What kind of a king of kings was he? He's a king who's on a cross dying. That's not a warrior king. That's a wimp. But Jesus, the ultimate pacifist, now in the modern version of Jesus, is the destroyer of the entire planet and anyone he doesn't like. He is the ultimate dictator, ruling over a planetary war to destroy all those who do not pledge allegiance to him. And that is what we're now up against. And it's going on right in front of our eyes, right as I do this video, right in the trial that's going on as I'm taking the time out to do this video finally. That's the exoteric version we're up against. Let's move on to the esoteric version. First of all, though, I guess I had this slide. Just want to summarize, because what I've been doing in these videos is I've been putting all the pieces together here. So the church, Thyracia, which some say is the lamp, but as I've been showing in the esoteric version is something else, but we're in the exoteric version right now. The church Thyracia has become evil. These were her good qualities. These were her bad qualities. And we talked about this in video 1. Here's the lamp. Thyracia is the church, the lamp. This is the exoteric version. The seal on the scroll is broken, and a horse and rider jump out. And that horse and rider gives the power to remove peace from the land. Yes, that's what we're going to do. We're going to jump out and destroy and remove peace. And then a trumpet sounds. I don't know why we get these bizarre trumpets in the esoteric version. Esoteric version, they make perfect sense, but in the exoteric version, trumpet sounds, and now a third of the sea turns to blood. Wow, a third of the sea is turning to blood. This is a good sign. Jesus is coming to kick ass over all those people we don't like. Now, a beast rises out of the sea, and it has a mortal wound that's been healed. It's haughty and blasphemous and makes war upon the saints and conquers them. That Jezebel, those women, those haughty women. It is given authority, those sexual, haughty women that can't control themselves and tempt those men, those secularists, those people who don't believe the way that we do. Probably me, as I'm doing this video, will get thrown in that category. Anybody that disagrees with my point of view or what I don't like, anybody that doesn't look like me, and every tribe, people, tongue, and nation are worshiping this beast, including probably me, because I'm doing this video, and therefore their names are not written in the book of life. And now all those people, but me, of course, if I'm an exoteric Christian, I'm the one. I'm not haughty. I'm just the one who knows. Who knows the truth compared to everybody else? I'm just the one who knows. So I know my name's written in the book of life. Not because I'm haughty or blasphemous, just because I'm so spiritual. Even though I may not be totally pure, may have had sex in my life, and I may have lied now and then. Anyway, because people are following this beast, the rest of the sea turns to blood and everything will die. Well, that's too bad. The whole planet's destroyed. Plastic everywhere in the sea. Fishes are dead everywhere. You guys should have listened to me. Why? Because I'm a true Christian believer, and you're not. And you have to be defeated, and I'm after you. The esoteric version. As we focus on the esoteric interpretation and look at the symbolism in a different way, what I will continue to do, which I've done before in all the other videos, is associate these battles with the chakras of the yoga tradition. Along these lines, the first thing we see is how the beast arises out of the sea. Sea, the sea, the sea, which is associated with the sacral center in the yoga system is associated with water, and water is also associated with emotions. As we saw in video 4 on the battle between the dragon and the celestial virgin, the dragon is Kundalini, and I documented that very well in that video. Go watch it. Now, when Kundalini rises, here's Kundalini with its 3.5 coils down here, and when it rises, any traumas or difficulties or impurities in these vortexes, in these centers, which some say are associated with different glands in the bodies, these traumas to these areas, these difficulties or impurities, they spill out. They start to spill out. They come to the surface. And if these wounds are not healed, then toxic emotions spew out. Hate, fear, lust, confusion, chaos, jealousy, and revenge. Now, there's no judgment in the fact that this happens. In the esoteric vision, we're just trying to get perspective. We're just trying to get understanding and have compassion for these kinds of things. And we see that if we're not careful, these emotions will remove our peace. Peace within ourselves, hate, fear, lust, confusion, chaos, jealousy, revenge, peace between each other, peace in our country, peace in our world. You know, in the attack in the Capitol, oh my gosh, there was the beast, in my opinion, esoterically. How much hate, how much fear, how much lust, how much confusion, how much chaos, how much jealousy, how much revenge, how much wounding is going on. And go back to my previous video, video 4, when I said there are times what's known as a planetary kundalini. There is planetary shifts happening, and that in itself is stirring things up inside of not just ourselves, but everybody. If we don't know how to handle things well, toxic emotions spill out and remove peace. And instead of maintaining calm and having a proper restraint regarding our desires and sex, which can take us up the Sushumna or central channel of the tree of life, we will split into the tree of good and evil, these Ida and Pingala currents here. Ida, Pingala, the masculine and feminine polarities. Now, if we're doing this correctly, as you see, they kind of come together and meet and are harmonized, come together and meet and are harmonized, come together, meet and are harmonized, and are harmonized, are harmonized, are harmonized. But if we don't do that in the proper way, they split apart and it creates a lot of chaos. And now, instead of sitting down and doing the inner work and the inner introspection to try and get a handle on our emotions that come up, and I'm human, my emotions come up, but I try to do a yoga practice. I try to sit down and say, oh, what is this irritation coming up? How can I do my breathing? How can I get centered? How can I go into meditation? How can I understand where this irritation came from? How can I handle it in the right kind of way so I don't make an enemy out of others and remove my peace? But if I can't do that, if I can't stay in the central channel, I'm not perfect. I don't always stay in the central channel. I don't have 144,000 points and petals of my stars or lotuses opened. I have imperfections. This stuff affects me. I'm human like probably most of you. But at least if we can become aware that the yoga system is about being aware that it's going on, that we're starting to battle inside ourselves and with each other. Peace is removed. We can no longer create harmony, healing, and unity with them, within ourselves, with our parents, with our children, with those that we're in a relationship with those in our community, in our country, on our earth. We're not, remember, unity is the main theme of the book of the life of the Lamb. And esoterically, the Lamb stands for what we need to sacrifice. It has 7 eyes that can see everywhere. It can see everywhere within ourselves the impurities that one of the 7 horns needs to be used for each one of the 7 chakras to poke it out, to clean it up, to purify it. Why? Because we want to access the tree of life and have life more abundantly and life more happily and more joyfully and more peacefully. Energy only flows up the channel or the tree of life up here when we make the necessary sacrifices that the Lamb stands for, by again using the 7 eyes to see and the 7 horns to poke out the negative tendencies. I'd rather sit down after a fight and look inside myself and figure out what's going on and come to my own inner peace so I can go to the person I'm having a fight with and peacefully come with love and compassion than just jump into that aggression, that anger, that revenge, that lust, that hate, the confusion, the chaos, which does us no good. Which brings us back to the beast. Now notice that the entire beast is made up of a leopard with 7 heads. That's what St. John says. Now, I looked and looked. I could not find an adequate picture that looked like a leopard with 7 heads. This is the closest I found. And notice it looks like a lion to me more than a leopard. We have leopard spots, but it looks like a lion's head. That's not what St. John says. It's a leopard with 7 leopard heads and a lion's mouth. So I believe this symbolizes that the masculine energy, I'm not saying it's male per se, it's male in any of us, that masculine energy that is the Pingala and sympathetic nervous system that activates us into fight or flight, that becomes aggressive. And then we tend to use speech that's more aggressive and hateful and attacking. I just saw the attack in the Capitol and just rewatched a lot of it through the trial yesterday. Today I'm not watching it. Do we see a lion's mouth? Do we see aggressive, hateful speech? Do we see people who are peaceful and introspective and trying to make sure that we cross the aisle and we understand each other and we come to harmony and we have a United States of America? No. Now, symbolically, the leopard and bear are feminine symbols. Leopards are known for their keen ability to function in the dark. Night and moon are feminine symbols. So again, we have a connection of the leopard with the beast and the feminine energy. This feminine connection with the leopard is seen later in Revelation with the emergence of the whore of Babylon who rides upon a leopard-like beast. We'll get to that video later. As for bears, they are known for their gentle nature, but when threatened, they too can become aggressive. Especially a mother bear protecting her cubs may be aggressive, using her bear claws, it has bear claws, to defend her offspring. So there's some interesting symbolism here, and I'm not saying I have it all down. I'm just kind of proposing some other ideas here. There does seem to be something that's happening when the feminine principle is being violated. Instead of loved and cherished, being violated, suppressed, intimidated, attacked, exploited. Her children, our Mother Earth's creations on the planet, are being attacked, abused, exploited. And just like a bear with claws, this feminine energy may start to cry out and say, enough of this exploitation, of this degradation. Why? Because it's hate and fear and not love. And we're not just talking about women acting that way, men acting that way. As for the beast, 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems, and I brought this up in the last video with the dragon. Diadems are crowns. You see these tiny little crowns here. Like the dragon, these refer to the 7 chakras. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And how the negative tendencies in those chakras rule us. They're crowned. They have rulership over us. And I explained in the last video, I'll explain it in here. Why do we have 10 versus 14 horns? 2 horns on each head. Why just 10 horns? Well, this refers primarily to how the 5 lower chakras are the most prone to split into the side channels of Ida and Pingala, where then we go into that battle and we try to hold on to our negative ways of being. You see that here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with 1 on each side, that's 10, that have to really be worked with before we get that energy to go straight up the tree of life. Esoterically, though the battle between the sexes, or even between patriarchy and matriarchy, is interesting, it's missing the mark of the esoteric practice here. From the esoteric point of view, any battle splits us into the side channels of Ida and Pingala that make up the tree of good and evil. St. John is warning us that anyone, male or female, who puts their life focus mainly on pleasure and sex and the world of the 5 senses out there is preventing themselves from entering the throne room, the Sahasrara, or the crown chakra, as it's traditionally always been called in the yoga system. As I have said in previous videos, most Christians do not understand the connections between Christianity and other religious traditions, especially those of Buddhism that existed 500 years or more before Jesus lived, and Hinduism that existed thousands of years before Judaism and Christianity came into being. I have studied those religions, and it may really, did me at first, but now I'm so used to it, make you surprised to see how many parallels there are in especially the Christian stories with, for example, Rama in the Ramayana in Hinduism. There's so many similarities between how Jesus acts and Ram acts that it's kind of strange when I first saw it. Or is it? Why am I going to say that? Because some argue, oh, that's proof Jesus went during his missing years down into India. Well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But what most of us don't understand is that that time on the planet a few thousand years ago, it wasn't like everybody was living in pockets all over the world and didn't intermingle. They did intermingle. And one of the main places they intermingled was in Egypt. And we know for a fact, the Bible says Jesus was taken down as a young child into Egypt, probably around 2 years old, they think, maybe younger, when they fled to Egypt, Joseph and Mary. What was in Egypt? The Library of Alexandria had been there for over 300 some years. Why was it originally there? It was destroyed at this time, but why was it originally there? Because that was the center place where people went and traveled to in order to exchange ideas. And believe me, those ideas were still being intermingled and exchanged there. You could still find yogis there. And there are some who say that Joseph and Mary were part of the Essene tradition, and the Essene tradition was practiced in yoga. And when you know yoga and the yoga tradition, I'm not talking hatha yoga, the poses of that's part of yoga, but I'm not just talking about the popular hatha yoga. Most people think yoga is being in certain postures that they do mainly for flexibility or to have a better looking body. That's part of yoga, but I'm talking yoga, the whole system of yoga is throughout the Bible. When you really, especially the Christian Bible, I should say, when you really understand the yoga system, you can see the parallels right away. Getting back to my point, brahmacharya, celibacy, complete control of sexual energy. Judaism, interestingly enough, was never an advocate of celibacy. And though some argue celibacy was first practiced in Christianity because St. John advocated an apocalypse in Revelation, so we shouldn't have sex because we're going to have babies and there's an apocalypse coming, and so we don't need to have sex, so we're all just going to be celibate so we can get into heaven. Maybe, but St. John seems to know an awful lot about the yoga tradition, which had been around for thousands of years before St. John. And that's not exactly how you would interpret it, that you have to have celibacy because there's going to be an apocalypse. And as I'm showing here, St. John's view of an apocalypse is an ongoing thing. It's not a once in a while thing, or a one-time only thing, I should say. So esoterically, what I am showing is St. John was a yogi, and he was advocating brahmacharya as ancient yogis did. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to say, therefore, you all have to be celibate. But I do want us to look at the practice of celibacy. We're going to start with this quote from Gandhi. From that day when I became brahmacharya, our freedom began. My wife became a free woman, free from my authority as her lord and master, and I became free from the slavery to my own appetites. Why then does St. John advocate celibacy, being chaste, or brahmacharya? And why does he even say that no one can get into the throne room where Jesus and the Lamb, representing sacrifice, are, unless they're chaste? And also, why has the yoga system, which St. John was clearly aware of, for thousands of years said that the brain, the crown center, the throne room, the brain is not the crown center, but the crown center connects to the brain, and the brain and the crown center are often thought to be the throne room, that these cannot function to full capacity unless it is chaste or pure. And why do yogis, as well as those in both Buddhism and the Catholic version of Christianity today, advocate celibacy or chastity? Now, most exoteric Christians would be horrified to consider that maybe St. John meant it. If you want to be exoteric, maybe St. John meant it when he said you can't get to heaven unless you've been chaste and celibate. They don't want to consider that view. Just want to read this quote over here. Brahmacharya is the vow of celibacy in thought, word, and deed. The chaste brain has tremendous energy and gigantic willpower. Now, these are some famous heroes from the Hindu tradition. How did Hanuman, who was in the Ramayana with Ram, become a Mahavir, the most brave? It is with this weapon of brahmacharya that he acquired unsurpassable strength and valor. The valor and greatness of Emperor, excuse me if I don't know how to say this right, Prithvijra was due to the strength of brahmacharya. The great Bhishma, who was part of the great epic of the Mahabharata, the grandfather of Pandavas and Kauravas, conquered death by brahmacharya. Now, I have another series that I haven't put up. It is complete, just haven't recorded it, on an esoteric view of the Mahabharata, where again, you can see the Pandavas and the Kauravas at battle with each other, very similar to what St. John is saying here in Revelation, which is interesting because the Mahabharata was written thousands of years before Revelation. So getting back to these exoteric Christians, to get out of this statement that St. John says you must be chaste or celibate, they either ignore that requirement completely or assume they will be saved even if they have never honored chastity, or they start to define chastity in a different way, as being restrained in your sexual life by just keeping sex within the confines of marriage. Because for thousands of years, few people have been able to abide by chastity, various religions have gone along with that view and simply tried to encourage people to regulate and control their sexual desires by following various religious and cultural norms. Now, in Hinduism, you get to do both. You get to have different stages of life. So you can be a householder and have sex and raise children, etc. And then eventually you become a sannyasi, or you go into this kind of lifestyle that Gandhi is talking about here, where you free yourself up from that. But other religious traditions, they really fight with this. You either have to be completely celibate, or if you're a householder, it's a lesser version, or you just throw celibacy out altogether. So here's some examples of how we try and regulate and define what's the right way to go here. And again, we're going to get out of this section in just a little bit when we get more into the esoteric view here, but let's get a handle on this first. So how do you regulate it? That's an outward form. That's not an inward form, which is the true yogic form. It's not involving understanding. It's let's create some rules here. So what are some of the rules, exoteric rules? Well, some insist on you got to be celibate. Some allow sex only within marriage, debating whether you could marry one or more people. So some say, oh, you get out of it by having, in the Mahabharata, Draupadi had 5 husbands. And there's a version of polygamy where women get to have the most fun. But there's other religions, such as in Islam and in the Mormon tradition, where it's mainly men that got to have more than one wife. And so they get to have polygamy. Only it's men that get to have, quote, the most fun. There's other traditions where they have different polyamory or polygamy, but I'm not going to get into those here. So some attempt to regulate who you can have sex with. So you can only have sex if it's heterosexual sex. You can't have sex if it's homosexuality, because that's bad. And some insist on men, well, you have to marry a virginal woman. And still the practice of child brides comes to mind, where men will go marry 12-year-olds because now that they've had their first menstrual cycle, it's okay to marry them, unless we think that's kind of weird. Well, here's something kind of weird. Prince Charles had to marry Princess Diana, who had to be a virgin. That was one of the reasons why he had to marry Princess Diana, was because of that rule in England, United Kingdom, in our modern day time. So others will allow men off the hook of chastity and just insist that women are the ones that need to be chaste. Now, some religions control also how you have sex with other people by allowing only the missionary position with the man on top, while others advocate a multitude of sexual positions, such as the Kama Sutra in the uh, famous book of the Kama Sutra, where you have all these different sexual positions you can practice, found in the Hindu tradition. I could go on, but here's my point. The point is, the esoteric version is not about whether we should all never have sex, or turn this into a discussion about Jezebel as a powerful and sexual woman and how women like her need to be controlled by men. I'm not going to get into any of that discussion. What's the right kind of sex, the wrong kind of sex? Because to me, none of this is the point. That's an outer form of trying to practice brahmacharya. And that's not the yogic path. So, what then is the main esoteric meaning? Simple. The beast is the sacral center. The sacral center has 6 petals, and we'll come back to the 666 in the next video, because that's when the false prophet arises and says that the beast is 666. But here's a hint. And St. John is asking us to do a battle with the energy in our sacral center so we can get a handle on it and move up the tree of life and get into the throne room of the crown chakra instead of splitting off into the tree of good and evil. Here's another picture of Jezebel. So I have associated the beast with the sacral center for a number of reasons. First of all, it comes up out of the sea. And the sacral center, as I've already said, is ruled by water, connected to the emotions, and associated with desire, pleasure, and sex. And St. John asks us, who is like this beast and who can fight it? Implying precious few of us can, which is why so many of us willingly worship the beast, sex, pleasure, desire, our emotional excesses, and give authority to that. This is really something to pause and think about. How am I still controlled like this beast? How do I still get up in my day and think about my pleasure, my sex desire? How do I lose it and go into emotional excess? How do you? This isn't easy, this yoga practice. And St. John knows that. Few can fight it. Very few of us. But if we're not haughty and blasphemous, we're going to admit this isn't easy. So we have to take a conscious approach here and do our yoga. Yoga means union. We want to get up into that throne room. What happens if we don't consciously sit down and look at what's going on in the way of our sexual life? What it is that we want in terms of pleasure? Why we desire what we desire? When and how we're given into emotional excess? Well, here's just a few things that will happen. Sex and love, because in my opinion, there really isn't love there in this version of it, become transactional, causing us to establish relationships based on what the other person gives us instead of what we can give. So basically, it's a sex for money trade. It's about money, security, prestige, or pleasure. And that's true even if it's families that help arrange the marriages. It's about how much security, what kind of dowry. That's not just in India where arranged marriages are still going on. Those arranged marriages happened all the time. In Europe, etc., marriage was a contract. What are you going to give me and my family? It wasn't just about prostitution. A higher form of prostitution is, let's make sure we have the right political alliance and we marry this king to this queen so that our countries could have peace. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe it's a little higher part of it. But it could also be so that our countries could have more stuff and power. Not exactly the higher part of it. If someone fails to provide us these things, we fall out of love. Ah, she's not as hot as she used to look. I don't have as much prestige. I don't feel as turned on. Oh, he doesn't have money anymore. Oh, he doesn't provide me with security. There's just no joy left in this. And we collapse into depression or explode into anger, control, and abuse. Now, I am not saying, and this is the number one thing I've done with most of my life is love and relationships, that therefore you should stay in an abusive relationship because you're so unhappy because of some exterior outer vow or pledge you made. That's not yoga. Yoga is introspection. We start to take a look at these things. We start to look at, why am I out of love? Is it because in truth I'm afraid to love? Is it because I don't know how to do the proper yoga inside of me to know how to make this relationship better? Or if I'm going to leave it, to know how to have a peaceful divorce? To know how to be healthy and loving co-parents for the sake of our children? I'm not looking in this conversation for rules and regulations. You should divorce. You should never divorce. That's an outer imposed control that has nothing to do with an inner exploration that will lead to that deeper understanding in those quotes on love that I already shared, where we understand what's going on inside of me. Maybe I did get into this relationship for some kind of money, security, sex, pleasure, prestige thing. Gosh, I put myself here, or I was put here by others. What do I do about it? Do I collapse into depression? Do I explode into anger? Do I go into control and abuse? Do I go into being seductive and manipulative? Is there another way out to handle it than this beast like way? Do I run away from it and abandon the person, leaving him or her in a desperate situation? Do I abandon children created in such a union? Is that why we must control and make sure people can't divorce, even though they're miserable as hell, so that their children will be good? And believe me, The Unexpected Legacy of Divorce was a book that I really recommend. Divorce isn't always good for children. Why? Because I admit it. A lot of us get into relationships for unconscious reasons that we don't understand. The impulses that have led us there. I deal with clients all day long having to look at this. And I try and help them look at it with as much compassion, love, and understanding as I can, because we're human. This beast is somebody I love because it's human, Beauty and the Beast. It's human, this beast. It's hard to deal with. Another thing that can happen with this beast, we become addicted to pleasure. Here's all the different things we can become addicted to: smartphones, workaholism, drugs, alcoholism, smoking, police. We're addicted to police. That's a weird one. Cigarettes. Maybe police are addicted to their authority. Drugs, synthetic substances, shopaholic, food. That touches on one of mine. I still struggle with sugar here and there. So we become addicted to all these things. I included porn in mine, anything that helps us avoid pain in our lives so we don't have to handle it in a conscious and loving way. So instead of doing the inner yoga, try and understand these emotions, understand these cravings, understand these desires, to understand this sexual hormonal stuff inside of us. We just grab for whatever. Another thing that we can become addicted to is control and rules and our righteousness over others. And instead of maintaining equanimity in our emotions, we become emotionally reactive. Why? We've never processed our emotional wounds and triggers. We don't sit down and go inside and do the inner healing and yoga work to really understand with empathy and love and compassion what happened to us. A lot of us have traumatic lives. I used to work with abuse as my specialty. Sometimes I think, why did I do that? And throughout my 20s and into my early 30s, gang kids and people's children who were horrifically abused, and group home kids and runaways and schizophrenics and homeless people, and This is how I spent my 20s. I don't know how you spent yours. But I was immersed in trying to see and understand these different traumas. And I hope I developed some empathy for it, some real empathy. Just look at this trauma, nightmares, our poor veterans, PTSD on the edge. Oh my God, with the riots that just happened, our anxieties, our flashbacks, the abuse. We have a lot of cleanup to do. This beast creates a lot of problems in our lives. It removes peace. St. John tells us this so that we don't maintain equanimity in our emotions. We become emotionally reactive. We've never processed our emotional wounds or triggers. We become easily angry, frustrated, sad, depressed, confused, anxious, and afraid. When Jesus was dying on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. You really understand that level of just unconsciousness and trauma and not knowing why we're doing what we're doing. This beast is very hard to deal with. Peace is removed from our lives, the horse connected here by St. John, as we now lust, covet, and obsess over having people, positions, and possessions come to us, even if they're not good for us. I deal with that kind of stuff all the time. People who are addicted to people that are not good for them because they have what I call a trauma bond. Regarding the sex and pleasure we want, if we fear we won't get it, then we try to manipulate, control, abuse, cheat, and lie to make sure we do get it and to help us maintain the sex and pleasure we crave. Something Jezebel did, maybe it was this. I don't know what kind of husband King Ahab was to her. Maybe he wasn't the best husband. Maybe he was a cheat. Or maybe he didn't have much of a backbone. Maybe it was frustrating for her to deal with him. I don't know. But the point isn't whether you should be a powerful woman or not. The point is, whether you're male or female, what are you doing with your sex and pleasure principle? And when you don't get what you want with it, do you sit down in yoga and meditate on that and try to harmonize that and come to peace with that? Or do you try to hold captive, destroy, exploit, rape, pillage, and enslave others, forgetting St. John's warning of the karma that will come to us in regards to this beast? Remember, you take others captive, you will be in captivity. You slay with the sword, you will be slain. In other words, if you don't focus on love, which takes you up the tree of life, you will go into this polarity. We just saw that in the riot on the Capitol building. You take others captive, you're going to now be in captivity. You slay with the sword, you're going to be slain. It's any time in history, any culture, any country, any peoples, any tribes that enter into this destroy peace. They do not have love. And I put all those quotes about love, especially the ones from St. John, up there to create the context for the antithesis to the beast. But there are even more consequences if we don't take a conscious approach to this beast, to our desire, pleasure, sex, and impulsive emotions. We end up trapped in deadening, incompatible, or even abusive relationships that fill us and our children, if we have them, with resentment and dread. If these relationships were not freely chosen, or we don't know how to put love at the core of any relationship. I put all those quotes about how to have a loving relationship there, but it's not easy, is it? Let's not be haughty and blasphemous and righteous and act like we got it down when it's not easy for most of us to defeat this beast. And as we go further in the Revelation story, we're going to learn more and more. We're learning in this video as well, the yogic methods of overcoming it, working it through, transforming it. Another thing that can happen, sex becomes divorced from a loving connection, and now it turns into lust, manipulation, control, degradation, and abuse. Other people in their bodies become things as their images, through porn, And their bodies are now used simply as props to satisfy our desires and fantasies, taking their energy, creativity, and vitality for ourselves without giving any love or creative energy to them in return. You know, the most beautiful sexual experience is one between two people who have real love for each other. Why? Because it frees the energy up. I'm not talking Tantra yoga with some stranger you don't even barely know, and you sit there and you lock your bodies together and you do some breathing exercises to get some spiritual high. How can you really open up the heart chakra with somebody if you don't have a clue who that person is? You're not going to have built over time love, compassion, and understanding with that person. How can you open up the throat chakra? And I'm thinking of different authors I've read their books, and I used to a long time ago kind of agree with him. Now I don't. God bless Margaret Anand. I think he did some good work, but I don't fully agree with you anymore. How can you open up the throat chakra if two people don't know in a relationship over time to have enough trust and enough love to speak their truth to each other? You can't do this just with strangers. I won't get into that whole talk. Tantra yoga, for the most part in the West, has been really turned into the beast. It's really become divorced from the spiritual practice it really is, which is part of what actually some of the most famous Tantra yogis are celibate. They never even had sex. But in the West, we turn everything into sex, unfortunately. So we run from what we create. We don't want to take a look at what we're doing. Or we come up with weird ways to say it's perfectly okay that all this is happening. We don't want to be consciously responsible for what we've created in the way of children, our media, our businesses, our governments, because we want only the spoils and none of the responsibilities for how we abandon, pollute, desecrate, debase, and even destroy ourselves, others, and our entire earth in the process. Now, I will make a comment on abortion for a moment, because I think that discussion is entirely misguided. I also think just going to school and getting a secular talk on body parts in regards to sex, all of this is divorced from discernment. How do we know who we should partner with, who we should share our sexual energy with? How do we really know what kind of person that is? Have we taken the time to find out? What's really going on in our heads when we're having sex with somebody? Are we busy thinking of somebody else? Are we busy just using their bodies? Are we busy then having a child and we think, oh, it's not my responsibility, so I can run away and not have to take responsibility for child support? Or I can just point a finger at her and say, you shouldn't abort. How dare you, you slut? You know, I mean, none of this is conscious. None of this is yoga. And this consistent, constant argument, putting the focus there, is missing the true point. We need discernment. We need time to understand ourselves, to understand the people that we are bringing into our lives. We're not taking that time anymore. And we're just diving into the impulse of pleasure without taking an understanding, taking time to have an understanding of ourselves and the people around us. And I deal with the heartbreaks of that, the real wounded head, the heartbreaks of that all the time. And we're dealing with the heartbreak of that on our planet, the overconsumption, the constant craving for stuff, for pleasure, for something external out there to satisfy us. That's what we're fed every day, every day. God knows if this video becomes possible, for all I know, there's ads popping up at you everywhere. Buy me, distract you, distract you. The beast is coming in, even in this video, saying, don't pay attention to her, pay attention to me. I'm sure you want this thing. I'm sure you want that thing. This beast is everywhere, and we're not taking responsibility for what we're creating, what we're consuming, even consuming visually. That's where, in my opinion, the focus needs to be. Because when we have that discernment, Then we will have loving partnering. And when we have loving partnering, then we will have children who are wanted. And when we have children who are wanted, then they will create a wonderful world because they won't be heartbroken. True, few indeed can destroy this haughty and blasphemous beast. Most of us choose to remain unconscious and give authority to it instead. We don't want any limits on it. We don't want to have any limits for ourselves. And now the tree of good and evil rules the sacral center. As emotional chaos runs rampant and everyone battles for pleasure and sex, we find men in conflict with women. We find gays in conflict with straights. We find Puritans in conflict with hedonists. And people are split into two camps. As I'm doing this video, we find Democrats in conflict with Republicans. And one group uses emotional persuasion to try and control and regulate all access to pleasure and sex, attempting to give only certain groups of people they deem as acceptable access to them, whether it's the 1% or the 99%. And the other group uses emotional persuasion to throw out all control and regulation so anyone can indulge in whatever kind of sex or pleasure they want without giving any conscious thought as to how healthy or unhealthy it is to satisfy any desire. When we're in the tree of good and evil, we are never going to come to resolution if we continue to only be split into two camps. So the yogic method tries to avoid this split by directing these opposing tendencies up the central channel of the Sushumna or tree of life. Attention is shifted away from suppression or excess. It's not about should we have sex or should we not have sex. It's about an inquiry. As we attempt to become more conscious regarding the role of sex and desire in our lives. And we're all going to have slightly different answers to that, depending on where we're at. I'm not going to try and answer these questions for you in this video. Instead, very shortly, I'm going to give you a chance to reflect and meditate and go inside and answer some of these questions for yourselves. But first, before we do that, let's do the esoteric summary of the beast. Remember, the church that I associated with this particular level is Thracia. There are 7 churches, and they represent 7 lamps, but they also represent 7 chakras. And they have good and bad characteristics that St. John lists, and I put them all in video 1 if you want to go see that. These are hints about the good and bad characteristics in each one of these chakras. This particular chakra is Svadhisthana. Some say it has to do with emotions or feelings, sensuality, sexuality, pleasure, and sociability. Go watch my previous videos, especially the ones about breaking the seals, sounding the trumpets, if you want to know more. This particular chakra is associated with water, as I've already said, and interestingly enough, they have stars, 666. Look kind of familiar? And that 6 has a different meaning. When we get to the next video, we'll talk about 666 than most exoteric people give it, but that's the next video, preview of coming attractions. And if we don't purify or clean this up when the seal is broken, the contents of what's in that chakra start to spill out. And a horse comes out who is given the power to remove our peace. If that energy in that chakra is purified, and when somebody irritates us, or we get into a fight with somebody, or we see something we don't like, or you have a point of view that disagrees with me, I'll do my best. I'm not always perfect. I'll take a deep breath, and I'll remember to love and to try and let love motivate my interaction with you what it is that I create, my sexual nature and my desire. But if it's not purified, what starts to spill out is all that emotional trauma, wounding, and abuse. My peace is destroyed, and I get into a fight with you. I get into conflict. And if there's enough conflict, it'll be chaos, an attack on the Capitol. Why? Because the sexes, or the liberals and the conservatives, or the Puritans and the excessive bloody sexual people, or the secularist and the religion, or the people that don't believe like I mean, look at it. I'm trying to deliberately make my faces ugly, ugly, ugliness comes in to our hormones, to our body, to our facial expressions, to the way that we are. And if that keeps going, then 1/3 of our emotional sea will be polluted. Probably spend about 2/3 of our life, maybe in a loving way, and 1/3 of our life with others in our relationships, reacting and spilling out our toxic emotions on them. If we're purified, our emotional desire natures will be illumined, and even when somebody upsets us, we'll maintain our peace and harmony, and we'll try and work with them in love. But if our emotions are polluted because we haven't done our inner work, we will seek to control, suppress, abuse, seduce, manipulate, become helpless, and essentially become ILL, I lack love. The lack of love in our lives, sadly, will spill out, and we'll start to put it as a toxic sewage dump onto others and even in our overall planet. So when we run from good works, we are no longer ruled by the rod of iron. What is that? That is the central spinal column. And the morning star, what is that? That's the planet Venus, associated with love, does not rule us anymore. Instead, we tolerate immorality. We can be like a Jezebel, whether it's male or female. We can become haughty. We can become excessive. We can become controlling and dominant. We will tolerate immorality, worshiping our emotional impulses, sexual desires, and quest for pleasure or power. King Ahab and Jezebel, and in my opinion, you know, the battles between Baal and Jehovah, it's still a battle, isn't it? Isn't it? For this reason, peace is removed, and 1/3 of the sea is polluted, because our polluted and toxic emotional disposition and desires now rule. We want all the stuff we can have, even if 1/3 of our ocean is polluted with plastic. God forbid we should get off oil and stop polluting the planet and plastics made of oil, and stop throwing all that plastic into the oceans and killing all the fishes and whales. God forbid we should stop that. We just have to keep our toxic emotional dump going unless we do the inner work. And why aren't we doing the inner work? Because our mortal wound is comprised of too many broken hearts and abandonment traumas that we haven't healed. We've just covered it up. How do we really cope with all of this? Well, let's do the inner work. Let's learn to restore peace by shedding light on our sexual nature, emotional excesses, and desires, not to judge and condemn them, to understand and purify and uplift them as they become calmer, so that we have love and compassion for them and for others. If we fail to do that inner work, then a beast will emerge out of that sea. It has emerged in us, in our planet overall. Now our hurt and angry emotions make us haughty and blasphemous. Now we make war on the saints, our spiritual and saintly nature. And we attack anyone who reminds us of our wound, our lack of love, or our need to keep our unhealthy desires in check. Don't you dare take my stuff from me. St. John's giving us a warning. If we don't destroy this beast by casting a light on it and healing it with Christ-like love, then we will become dead emotionally. We will become captive to and slain by our inability to love and be loved. And then hate, lust, cruelty, and chaos will run amok. And our entire emotional sea will become toxic. Hate, lust, cruelty, fear, and chaos rule. Human bonds and hearts are frequently broken. To cope, we substitute lust and pleasure for love and become emotionally dead and lost. St. John isn't saying we have to go down this road. He's saying, let's not go down this road. He gives us warnings to do the yoga work, to understand the beast of sex, excess desire, overconsumption, lust, hate, cruelty, emotions run amok. He's warning us, clean up, because this isn't the way the world is meant to be, and it's not the way he wants the world for us. Revelation is something that is going on all the time. And only as each and every one of us individually does our cleanup work and opens the 144,000 points and petals of the stars, there's a star that rules each chakra. Go watch my earlier videos to get more educated on all of this. Then we'll have the New Jerusalem. We'll have peace on earth. Let's reflect. And as I do this closing meditation and reflection, I like to hide me. You can just kind of go inward. You can keep your eyes opened or closed if you want. And I'm just going to ask you a series of questions and give you a little time to reflect. If you want, you can always skip to the end point of this video and take a little longer with these questions for yourself. Let's all go within and conquer that beast with love. What then is the solution to this battle that has gone on for thousands of years about the appropriate place in our lives spiritually regarding pleasure and sex? Regulation's been tried and continually doesn't work. Without conscious awareness, temptations will always come in and rules will always be broken. Hedonism has been tried, and these excesses frequently don't work either, as they can lead to spiritual and moral bankruptcy. Knowing these approaches don't work, the true yogi takes a hard look at sex and desire and engages in an enlightened inquiry. Here we go. What is the positive and harmonious interplay between the male and female polarities within myself and between those I love? What is the positive and harmonious interplay between the male and female polarities within myself, between those I love? Why do I attract and feel attracted to the people I do? How have repression or excess impacted my ability to be more loving, wise, and kind? Have repression or excess led to a dampening or a perversion of my creative energies? Does what I create reflect more material or spiritual impulses? How does a lack of love in any union lead to a spiritual deadening that we can no longer access our inner nature, peace, and joy? How have disrupted and unhealthy attachments left me or those I know afraid, miserable, and wanting to substitute control and or seduction for love? How is control a form of abuse, replacing fear for love and destroying our creative potential, as well as minimizing the spiritual expression of whatever and whoever we create? How can suppression or excess of sex and pleasure foster addictive behaviors and abort our creativity among the refuge of destroyed dreams, broken hearts, and severed bonds? Among the refuse, I should say, of destroyed dreams, broken hearts, and severed bonds. How can suppression or excess of sex and pleasure foster addictive behaviors and abort our creativity among the refuse of destroyed dreams, broken hearts, and severed bonds? What changes can I make right now to ensure fear becomes love? A balance between male and female polarities exists, and I go up the tree of life where the beast will not take hold as I harmonize and respect these opposites. Answering these questions and more requires great discernment. Take a little time in your life to list the different kinds of oppositions that you're making. And then ask yourself, why are you doing battle instead of creating unity and harmony? Unity and harmony, they require great discernment. We're not talking about uniformity, mushing everything into one way of thinking. We're talking about right view and the right relationship between differences. Not only our honest answers will allow us to restore equanimity and peace back into our lives, only then do we find the true meaning of love, take responsibility for what we create, and seek to love and cherish all of creation in unity and joy. Let's commit now to look at all of this with wisdom and no longer be sucked in by hormones and passion. And we can create love, understanding, and cooperation, putting the beast to rest, so that the battle between Yahweh, patriarchy, and Jezebel, matriarchy, or any other opposition exists no more. Thank you so much for living through this video. And thank you so much for supporting this work. I always ask this. If you feel so inclined, one of the best ways that you can help this work is to subscribe to this channel, or if you like this video, become a Patreon. I do have some gifts for you. Here is the link for that. Thank you so much for listening.